Now, container gardening can be a great way to maximize your limited garden space. However, there are 5 common mistakes that can limit the potential and success of your container garden. So in today's video, we will do a deep dive into some of the common mistakes and also offer some solutions. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, the first common mistake is to choosing the wrong container. Now, if you go to a garden center, you'll find that there are quite a lot of different type of containers. They come in different shapes, come in different sizes, made out of different material. So obviously, when you select your containers, there are a couple of things that you need to consider. Obviously, you need to consider the space to make sure that you do not choose a container that is too big for your space. But importantly, you want to choose a container that will fit into the aesthetics of your area. If you have a balcony, you want to make sure that it will fit in and make sure that it will not be out of place. But one of the most important things when you need to consider when selecting a container is to make sure that the container will be able to be big enough to accommodate your plant. So plants have different root systems, and if you choose a small container, it can definitely stunt the growth and the development and the harvest of the plant. In order to make sure that your plant has sufficient space, root space to grow, it's important to choose a container that is big enough to be able to accommodate your plant. Now, crops like tomatoes, zucchinis, and peppers require bigger containers because the root systems are quite big. However, leafy greens and some herbs might require much less space. So it's important to choose a container that will be suitable for your plant. Another good thing about containers is that they can be repurposed. So you can take any other container made out of any other material and repurpose them. But just make sure that you have sufficient draining holes at the bottom. A big mistake will be not to have sufficient draining holes, which will cause the roots of your plants to rotten, because healthy roots equals a happy plant, and that is what we are looking for. We want to create a conducive environment for our plants to grow and to thrive. So the draining holes are important because they firstly make sure that all the excess water get expelled so that the roots cannot get rotten, and so that there can be also sufficient oxygen at the bottom. So here is a container that we have used in repurpose. This was an old baby tub. We converted this, and you can see that here we made some holes at the bottom just to accommodate the plants. So we managed to grow a couple of leafy greens, and I'm planning to just fill it again with some potting mixture to grow some other leafy greens for the upcoming winter cooler season. But choosing the right container is one of the most important things to have a thriving container garden. Now, another mistake is using the wrong potting soil or potting mix. So it's important to know that although you can use garden soil from your garden, that it could limit the success of your plants, because soil from the garden is much more dense. There's a possibility that the soil will become compact, and at the end of the day will affect the root of your plants that will be growing in your container. So another problem and risk that is associated with using soil from your garden is that you could introduce soil-borne diseases and also some weeds into the container. So you want to make sure that you use a proper potting mix or potting soil to ensure that you create a conducive environment for your plants to grow. So it's important that when you are choosing a medium that you use a good potting mix. So you can go to a nursing center and buy a potting mix that will be suitable for your containers. Now you can also be creative and create your own potting mix. It's just make sure that you have compost, and you can also use some other minerals, organic minerals, that will ensure that the soil is retained in the soil. So you can use perlite, vermiculite, or peat moss. So all of these things can be mixed to create your own potting mix. But it's important to know the quality of the soil will definitely influence the quality of your vegetables. Now, the third mistake is overwatering or underwatering. So many container gardens actually fail because of either you are overwatering or underwatering your plants. So water plays a very important role in your when you grow in containers. It's important to water and keep your plants watered regularly. However, you should also avoid a situation where you overwater. So the most important rules that apply to watering is to make sure that you water at the root zone and not on the leaves, because the problem with watering on the leaves is that it could lead to development of fungal diseases on the plant, and that is not the situation that we want, right? So we want to make sure that we water at the root zone of the plant and not on the leaves. Another rule is to make sure that you water in the morning. That will just allow your plant to the leaves to get dry during the course of the day, to be ready if for a very warm day, to be able to absorb the heat and to grow. So make sure that you water early in the morning, but obviously you can also water when it's required, but ideally you want to make sure that you water in the morning, and you want to water deep. You want to make sure that the plants are actually getting sufficient water. Now, when it comes to frequency, there are also a number of factors that will determine how frequently you will be watering your plants. So if the container is small, it will dry out much more quicker. So it's important then to water maybe even twice a day on very hot days. Yeah. So the frequency will be determined by the size of container. Small containers tend to dry out much quicker. Small seedlings also require that you water them also on a regular basis. But make sure that you water regularly. Keep check on your containers, because especially on very hot days, your containers will dry out very quick. So it's important then to make sure that you water your containers and keep your plants happy, because that is what the goal is all about, to ensure that we keep our plants happy to grow and thrive. Yeah? Now, mistake number 4 is not fertilizing regularly. Now, the difference between growing in ground and in container is that plants that are growing or that are in the in-ground garden will have access to a lot of different minerals, while as container as plants that are growing in container only have access to the nutrients that you as a gardener will avail to them. So it's therefore important that you need to keep your plants healthy and keep the soil actually fertile. So the 3 main nutrients that are in fertilizers is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So these are the main nutrients that you will find on the label of fertilizers, and they are normally indicated as NPK on the packet. So N stands for the nitrogen, P is for phosphorus, and the K is for potassium. So this is an example of very balanced fertilizer. You can see on the packet it is 2-3-2. So that is just showing that there's 2% nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in this fertilizer. So depending on what you will be growing, it's important to feed your plants accordingly. So for more leafy greens, for herbs, you can use balanced fertilizer, but you can also use a high nitrogen one for leaf development, while as your plants like tomatoes and peppers will require one with a high level of potassium. That will just allow for better fruit development. So if you want us to maybe do a deep dive to understand the different type of fertilizers, then please let us know. But it's important just to know that you as a gardener are totally responsible for what your plant will be having access to, the nutrients, because they're not in in-ground garden where they will have access to different nutrients and minerals, but you will be responsible to make sure that you feed your plant on a regular basis. The good thing about organic fertilizers like this, they are slow releasing, they take time after some activity within the soil. So you can do them every 3 months, or you can also put a liquid fertilizer. So you can either put a liquid fertilizer or you can put a granular fertilizer on a regular basis. But obviously you can check the packaging, and the idea is to use organic fertilizer instead of chemical fertilizers, because the idea is that we want to build the soil. So it's important to build the soil, and the plants will then feed the nutrients from the soil. So you want to make sure that you create that conducive environment for your plant, and especially for containers, because as you water, nutrients will be leaching out of your container, which means that your plant will not have access to all the nutrients. That's why keeping your plants well fed or keep the soil well fed will enable you to have a thriving container garden. Now, the fourth mistake that can affect your container garden is location. So plants are sun worshippers. They do very well in the sun. So if you want your vegetables to grow properly, it's ideal, it's recommended that you should place them in a location where they receive 6 to 8 hours, 4 to 6 hours of sunlight. 6 to 8 hours. 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. So it's important that you should check your environment to see how much sun will your containers get. But I don't think you should give up in an event where you find that you do not get up to 6 hours of sunlight. Some plants grow very well, like some root crops like beetroot, carrots, leafy greens do pretty well in areas where they are partly shaded. So it's important not to give up totally just because your area do not get adequate sunlight. What it means is just that you might not be able to grow those heat-loving crops like tomatoes, zucchinis, because those plants are heat-loving crops. But it doesn't mean that you have to give up on your gardening journey if you do not get that much sun exposure in your location. You can still grow some other crops that will do pretty well in some partly shaded environments. So I hope this will enable you to avoid these mistakes, and I hope that your container garden will continue to thrive. So if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and for all those people who have subscribed, thank you so much, you are awesome. And if you want to check out my favorite quick rain crops, I'll put a link of that video up here. But thank you so much for watching. Keep on sowing and growing. Peace.